Hi, everyone. I'm Alison Kilgore. I'm one of the asset managers with DOH. We may have met if you have home or HTF funding, but those of you who I have not gotten to meet yet, thank you for joining. So as Ariel mentioned, she is going to be recording this. So if you have questions and you want to drop them into the chat box, Ariel will be able to either stop me and we can address that question then, or if we're going to touch on it later in the presentation, we may corral all of those to the end. Because this will be recorded and posted on the website, we'll make sure not to say, Ariel from X organization has a question on the marketing plan, just so that your name and organization are not on the recording. So first we're going to talk a little bit about kind of in general what the marketing plan is. It looks like some of you from in the chat have a lot of experience with these plans, and some of you are pretty new. So we'll start right at the basics. So the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan, the purpose for the marketing plan is to help ensure that housing providers, so all of the grantees from the state that receive federal funds, are outreaching to additional populations to ensure equal housing opportunities regardless of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or disability. So listed below that are four regulations or acts that are what guide the need for the marketing plan or the requirement for the marketing plan at your particular property. So at all of our properties, the Fair Housing Act reigns, and we'll speak about that a little bit more kind of towards the end of the presentation today about what is mandated from the Fair Housing Act within the marketing plans. For those of you that receive Housing Trust Fund dollars from the state, those are federal dollars. Those dollars trigger the requirement for the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan if the state restricts 5 or more units. There are, I know, some local municipalities that have funds that are called HTF or Housing Trust Fund. Those may be a little bit different, so just know the nuances between those. But our federal HTF does trigger the marketing plan. Home dollars, whether they're from the state or from a local participating jurisdiction, your county or your city, if there's 5 or more total home units, that will trigger the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan. So if maybe you received home funding from the City and County of Denver and also from the state of Colorado, if in total we restrict 5 or more units, that will trigger the marketing plan. And if you receive CDBG, any number of units restricted by CDBG will trigger the marketing plan. So just be aware of, the funding that's happening at your property and how many units are restricted, and that would be what would trigger the marketing plan. And if you have state funds from us, such as HDG, check your contract or speak with your asset manager for applicability. And even if you're operating a property that may not be requiring or mandating the marketing plan from one of these sources, it still is best practice to maintain a plan and help you ensure you're reaching out to certain populations. All right. So the marketing plan itself assists the owners, agents, and property management to effectively market the availability of the housing opportunities of these affordable units to individuals of both minority and non-minority groups that are what's called least likely to apply, or LLA, which we'll speak about a lot today for occupancy. So the marketing plan must be reviewed at a minimum every 5 years. That is the requirement that's passed down from HUD with regards to this plan. However, we suggest that it should be reviewed whenever there's significant changes in the demographics. So if your community has experienced a big shift recently, it may be a good idea to review it with more frequency than every 5 years. And we encourage all owners to revisit the marketing plan after your initial lease up to compare what you had marketed for versus what happened after either your lottery or your open marketing period, to see if you were successful in your outreach efforts. And we'll speak more about that as we walk through the plan today. All right, so now that we know the background of it, we'll go on and we'll actually walk through the pages of the applications. So sent out with the materials for this webinar today was 2 documents. There was a copy of today's PowerPoint presentation and also this kind of marked up version of the actual plan itself. So if you'd like a copy of those, and this is like too small on the screen to read, feel free to drop your email in the chat or reach out to us and we can send you a copy of those. But we'll walk through everything today on the call. So when we go through the marketing plan, we're going to talk about 3 things on every page. We're going to talk about how to fill it out. Some of the pages are very self-explanatory. Some of them can be a little bit confusing. We're going to talk about what DOH looks for when we come to monitor, either in person or virtually. And we'll touch on just a few of the common errors that we see so that you don't fall victim to any of these omissions that might end up being a finding in a monitoring. So on the first page of the marketing plan, which is on the right side of the screen, I hope it's not too tiny for everybody to see, but this is what the template of the marketing plan looks like. So for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to complete one of these yet, this is a HUD template form that the state uses to pass along this requirement to our grantees. This does get updated with some frequency. So you'll see in the top right corner that the expiration date of this version of it expired on January 31st of last year. There still has not been an updated version of it. I checked earlier this week, did not see one, but it is best practice to check with some frequency, whenever you're updating this, just to make sure you're using the newest version of the form. Every once in a while we do see old versions float in, and it may not be capturing all the information that is required. So a few things on this first page that we want to make sure are being completed. The Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan needs to be project specific. So if you're a shop that has a couple of different properties, even if they're in the same area, your marketing plan needs to be specific for that individual project. So if you have a marketing plan for a project down the street, you do need to maintain one for each site. So we will be checking to ensure that it's project specific. On the top right, you'll see in red circle with a box around it, the number of units here. We sometimes see that folks just list the number of restricted units. So if there's, say, 5 HTF units, we may see 5 there, but we're actually looking to see the total number of projects in that, total number of units in that project. And then in 1E is listing the housing and expanded housing marketing area. So your initial marketing area may be the county. If you're in a smaller or less populated county, you may need to expand your search and do, a larger area, maybe the, larger statistical area, or maybe statewide. You just need to maybe expand it if you're in a smaller area. And then DOH also looks, when we're checking down at the bottom, for the advertising start date. So if you are a new construction and you're preparing this marketing plan as a requirement of either the application for funding with the state, or you are nearing the end of construction, you're about 90 days out from beginning to market your project, that's the trigger for the state to request a copy of your marketing plan to review. And we request to review it in advance of marketing to ensure that the least likely to apply groups have been identified and that those targeted marketing efforts are going to go out for this new property to ensure that these folks that we've identified as being least likely to apply have the opportunity to apply for this new property. If you are using this to re-rent properties, maybe rebuild a wait list, or if you have, exhausted a portion of your wait list, you need to remarket for a certain size unit. Maybe you went through everybody that wanted a studio and you need to increase your advertising. You can use the same form to determine where you'll be advertising to obtain more folks for your wait list. All right, so page 1, pretty self-explanatory. I don't see any crazy questions coming in on the chat. So page 1, very easy. So page 2 is where it starts to get exciting. So anybody that has done these before will know that once you get page 1 done, you actually need to do a little bit more research to be able to continue on to the next few pages. So in order to complete page 2 of the form, you actually need to jump a little bit later in the actual form to some of the worksheets. And on the worksheets is where we'll get the data that's going to drive our advertising and our outreach. So if you're following along in a PDF of the marketing plan, jump to page 9, which will bring us to what's called worksheet 1. And within worksheet 1, this is where we're going to be collecting the information on the populations that we're going to be working with. So if you can see on the right here, we'll work from left to right and kind of walk through the data that should be in that column and where it comes from. So in the first column here, the project's residents. So if you are a property that's new construction and you don't have any tenants yet, you don't have a wait list yet, these first 2 columns, projects residents and projects applicants data, will be blank. But if you are in existing construction and you are just using this to build your wait list or to re-rent for vacancies, the first column here, project residents, that's going to be information about the demographics, including disability status, that you're going to pull from your generally your property management software or similar. So what percentage of your tenants identify as white or Black or African American, and all the way down. So that's where that data will come from. The second column is the project's applicants data. So this is going to be the demographic and disability status from persons waiting on your list for occupancy. So it's important that when you're marketing for your property that you revisit your application and ensure that you're requesting this information from anybody that's applying to your property. Of course, entering information about race, ethnicity, and disability status are optional fields on an application, but collecting that information up front will help you better drive your advertising goals to ensure that you're outreaching to the correct populations to drive in applicants that are considered least likely to apply. The census tract data, this is whenever I would have to put one of these together for a new project. This is where I'd have to go and get another cup of coffee because you have to pull up the information. I see a nod. This is where a thumbs up. This is where I require an extra cup of coffee and I require full concentration because navigating the data in the Census Bureau's website used to be something that I would really fear. The Census Bureau recently came out with a really great video specifically on how to get this exact information to complete this exact form. So we linked to it here and also at the end of the training. It's like a 13-minute video that you can just have streaming on your TV and hit pause whenever you need to key in your next kind of step to gather the census data for your project. They did a really good job on it. I highly suggest instead of fearing filling out this column, just to pull up that YouTube video and have it streaming and kind of toggle between the two until you get really comfortable in pulling that data. So the data that will come out of the Census Bureau website will assist you in completing the census tract and housing market area and expanded housing market area if applicable. So you'll kind of export, I think it's 2 reports out of there if you're just filling out census tract and housing market area. They're kind of large and a little bit challenging to print off, but if you save it as a PDF, they should always be attached to your marketing plan as kind of, showing the backup for how you got the numbers to determine the populations in your census tract and also your housing market area. So when we're reviewing this worksheet 1, DOH is going to look for completeness. So if you're an existing property in operation and we see that you're not collecting the information about the applicant data or your project residents, that's going to be a comment from the state when we review those because it's important that that data is being collected. So common areas that we see is missing data or folks not pulling that census data for one reason or another, or making broad assumptions on who the least likely to apply group is. Let's see what other comments we had here. Any questions on worksheet 1? Feel free to drop them in if you do. All right. So the next step after you've determined all the information for the different populations, so the residents, census tract, and housing market area, you're going to look across in the rows and determine which population is considered least likely to apply. So if within your building, if you have X percentage of persons that identify as Hispanic or Latino, but then within the census tract or the housing market area, those percentages are higher, you know that that group is underrepresented in your building and would need to be targeted for additional outreach. Similarly, if you're a new construction and so you don't have any data for the project residents or the wait list to compare against your census tract and marketing area, you can see who's underrepresented in your census tract versus your marketing area and target those populations for additional outreach. Generally speaking, if the population is less than 1%, so say you're Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, maybe 0.1% or 0.05%, that may not be necessary to do additional outreach because the population is so small within your census tract. And sometimes that will actually even be 0, depending on where you're working. If you have questions on whether or not to include or exclude a population as least likely to apply, you're welcome to reach out to DOH and we can walk through it with you. The next slide is just going to be a sample of what you can see when you're going to be pulling this data from the Census Bureau. It is, kind of folder after folder after folder after folder of different ways to winnow down the data. So that's why I strongly suggest watching that video on pulling the data from the Census Bureau. All right. So next, we're going to go on to what's called Worksheet 2. And in Worksheet 2 is something called the residency preference. And within DOH's purview, residency preference is quite rare. If you are seeking this preference for a new project, you do need to speak with your DOH development specialist early in the process. If this is something that your project is pursuing, DOH would be looking for compliance with non-discrimination and equal opportunity requirements. We'd also be concerned about a potential for steering, which would be a fair housing violation. And common areas that we would see would be unintentional discrimination or incomplete data. So definitely reach out to DOH if this is something that you have or believe you have at your project. DOH would confer to HUD to ensure compliance with federal regulations. But generally, this is something that is scratched off as not applicable. Most projects are not instituting any sort of residency preference because it can be quite tenuous. All right, so then we're going to skip to Worksheet 3. Hopefully this is not too terribly small. So in Worksheet 3, this is where you're going to identify the community contacts. And this is where DOH will have generally a lot of questions if this is blank or incomplete. So for each identified least likely to apply population, you need to identify one or more community contacts. So for example, if one of the least likely to apply groups that you identified in Worksheet 1 was Black or African American, a community contact that you might identify as the local chapter of the NAACP. General organizations are fine in addition to the specific groups that work with that population. So if you have identified your populations and you have several community contacts that are well established in the community and serving this specific population, and you also want to add in a general organization, so general human services or a food bank, those are fine, but they need to, your community contacts need to specifically serve your least likely to apply population. And I think that's it for this section 3. We have some suggested starting off points in the resources slide at the end of the presentation, just as like a place to get started. But it is within your organization to make those contacts within the community of organizations that really can help ensure that these least likely to apply communities know about the housing opportunity and are given an opportunity to apply to the wait list or to the new construction. All right. So each of your targeted populations will be listed in the left-hand column. And in the right-hand column, is a lot more information than we generally see. So it should be the organization, the point person there, their contact information, their experience working with that population. So if it's a nonprofit, when did they operate? How do they work with the community? So more than just the name of the nonprofit. I'm just making sure that you're really filling that out. Sometimes you need a second sheet if you have more than one community contact for each population. Right. Next is worksheet 4, the last of the worksheets, and this is another one that causes some confusion. So within worksheet 4, this is the second way that you're going to be doing outreach. So it's the community contacts and then additional advertising. So within the proposed marketing activities, similar to the community contact, you'll want to be publishing your advertisement or your availability of affordable housing in publications or in areas that are going to be read, seen, or heard by that least likely to apply population. So if you've identified Hispanic or Latino as the least likely to apply group, you may want to take out an ad in La Voz newspaper, posted in Spanish, something that's going to be seen by that population. If you're a small community, you may need to expand your marketing area to be a little bit larger to have an option for a publication that would be read by that least likely to apply group. And when you are completed with your advertising, we suggest that you keep a copy of those ads. So if you publish something in the newspaper, keep a copy of that tear sheet or that invoice as proof that you did the advertising to that population. Some advertising that we see that's listed on here that does not meet the requirements would be really general advertising. So things like Craigslist or Nextdoor or apartments.com. Those are, you can put your ads on there, that's fine, but it does not satisfy this least likely to apply targeted advertising outreach. We do suggest that everybody list their apartments on coloradohousingsearch.com. That's a larger statewide inventory of affordable housing, but just make sure that when you're filling out worksheet 4 that you have a specific outlet that's going to reach that group. And some publications will have publicly available the demographics of their readership. So if you're wondering, what is the demographic readership of this newspaper or this website that we're trying to advertise on? Do we think that this could realistically, reach this least likely to apply group? That can sometimes be available as well. Or if you're actually purchasing advertising space, sometimes the sales folks can assist you with that as well.
Also, we do have a question. And the question is, what if you use one home or any type of coordinated entry? How do you reflect that on the marketing plan?
Great question. So we'll talk about that a little bit later of why the marketing plan is required, even if your property doesn't advertise to the general public. So maybe all of your clients come in through the COC or coordinated entry, or you have an MOU to receive all your referrals from, say, the VA, for example. But there are other parts of this marketing plan that are specifically applicable to all projects, even if you're not marketing publicly. So you still should complete the comparisons between the on worksheet 1 where you're comparing the residents, the wait list, and the census tract and housing market area. But where you're going to be advertising to may not be, radio, publications, community contacts, because you already have those MOUs set up. And so that's something that the state would look to see. If you're indicating that you're not taking any applications from the general public, that you get all your referrals from an MOU, we would want to see that MOU. All right. So once you've completed all 4 of these worksheets, we can actually go back to page 2, and we can actually have all the information that we need at this point to fully complete the rest of this form. So we're back to page 2 if you're following along in the handout. And you will now have, and you've completed question 3A, which is worksheet 1, where we did all those comparisons. 3B, the targeted marketing activities. So this is where you're going to indicate, after all of your research, which are your least likely to apply groups. So if you did your comparison and you indicated Hispanic or Latino and Black or African American, you would check those off. The state would look to ensure that those groups are reflected in your community contacts and also in your planned marketing activity. And I see a question here that came in. It says, how do we address using the media/website instead of paper advertisements? So when I would advertise, there was an online periodical or kind of online like monthly e-news that was targeted for persons with disabilities. When I would purchase the ad space, they would give me a certification that I'd advertised in that publication for X days. After I paid the invoice, they would give me that certification. Or you could also just print out the browser with the timestamp at the bottom, just showing that your ad was published during that time. It's a great question. Both of those would be acceptable for DOH. Sometimes if I would forget to take a screenshot and print that I had published the ad online, would speak with the salesperson and say that I need certification that I advertised in your publication on X days, and they're pretty used to providing that. Okay. Great. All right, so on page 2, the next block is for the residency preference, which we had indicated is going to be pretty rare. So assuming that you're not doing that, it's just a drop down, and then you wouldn't need to complete anything else for residency preference. The rest of page 2 talks about the proposed marketing contacts for the community and also the methods of advertising. So those are the attachments. We also encourage you to attach a proposed copy of the ad or proposed community contact letter. What we would be looking for on those would just be to ensure that the Fair Housing Equal Opportunity logo is in the footer, and that the information is accurate with regards to the project that's coming online. All right, so we see that, does the marketing need to be property specific, or can it just represent the organization in general? So that a little bit depends on which wait lists you're opening and how your property management company maintains those wait lists. So some property management companies maintain a central wait list from which folks can indicate on their application which properties they're interested in. We just want to ensure that the applicant is the one that is determining which properties they're interested in applying for, and not that based on the wait list, maybe where they're living or what school their kids are in. We want to make sure that they're not being steered to a specific project or another. So if you maintain a central wait list, make sure it's the applicant is determining which projects they want to be considered for. And if you have an individual wait list for each property, maybe each of your buildings is very unique. One may be for seniors, and one might be an SRO. You may need to keep separate wait lists for those. So it kind of depends on how your property operates. I hope that answered your question. Write in again if it did not. So on page 3 here, this is where it will be really important to ensure that you have walked the property recently. So if you are completing this marketing plan from the main office, this is a good reminder to take a trip out to the property and make sure that for 5A, that the fair housing poster is prominently displayed. Sometimes when a project opens, folks forget to post that, and it's a really important thing to have up and prominently displayed. It's definitely one of the things that DOH looks for when we come to visit, and I know other local monitors will check for that as well. Forgetting to post that or posting it and getting taken down or posted over is considered evidence of a discriminatory housing practice under the Fair Housing Act. So do head out to the field and make sure, or have one of your property staff put eyes on that poster. If you're renewing this and you knew that the poster was up when you opened the building or were there last before COVID, check and make sure it's still up and didn't get covered up by other notices or coffee spilled on it. It is available on HUD's website with specifications of how large it needs to be. We linked to it at the end of this training. It's available in English and I think the 12 other most commonly spoken languages. So you can go ahead and download that if you need a fresh copy. You'll indicate here under 5A where that's posted. So is it in the management office? Is it by the elevator bank, in the laundry room? The more the merrier when it comes to that, especially when we come to visit, making sure that it is publicly available. Next is with regards to the Affirmative Fair Housing Marketing Plan in 5B. So the marketing plan needs to be a publicly available document. So when DOH comes on site to monitor, this is one of the questions that we ask the property management staff if they have a copy of the marketing plan on site. The answer needs to be yes, and we'll ask that even if we've already obtained it directly during either construction or administrative monitoring. So we want to make sure that that publicly available document is truly available for public use. So that question may feel a little bit redundant when we come to monitor, but that's the rationale that we're asking for. It is just to ensure that the public has access to it. The project site sign, this is if you have a sign in front of your building saying it's like Alson's Garden Apartments, that sign, it needs to also have fair housing language on it or near it to ensure that persons that might be coming to your building interested to obtain an application know that that property operates under the Fair Housing Act. And really importantly on this page here is the evaluation of marketing activities. So this should be a pretty robust explanation of what is your organization, your team going to do to evaluate the effectiveness of the outreach that you did to your community contacts or the targeted advertising that you did to reach out to those least likely to apply groups. So is it going to be, after lease up, we will pull the demographic data for the residents and the wait lists and compare it against that. And you may need to increase the community contacts that you make because maybe you didn't get as many applications from a certain population as you had wanted to because they were underrepresented and they still are. So you may need to tweak your marketing after you fully lease up, or if you have a big shift in the demographics in your area, you may need to change your marketing efforts a little bit there as well. So this is a big area that the state will look at when we're monitoring, just to make sure that, it's not just one and done. It's kind of a living, breathing document that needs to get updated as things change. All right. Page 4 of the plan. So on page 4 here is where we are going to look to ensure that there is somebody identified on staff that's responsible for training for the affirmative marketing. So that may be a regional, it may be a compliance officer, it may be somebody in legal, kind of depends on how your organization is set up. A larger shop or a housing authority may have a whole team that ensures fair housing compliance and does also the affirmative fair housing marketing training. Some of this may need to get farmed out if you're a smaller shop. But that's where you're going to list there kind of who that point person is or who that department is that's responsible to ensure that this document exists and that staff is trained on it and really understands how to put it into practice. When DOH is coming out to look this, we look for completeness and also regular and frequent fair housing training. So COVID, I mean, it might have been the last time you all got together to do a fair housing training was before March of 2020. So if it's been a while since y'all have done a fair housing training or trained on the marketing plan, it might be time for a refresher. I know we're all very comfortable now doing things virtually, so you may be able to do it virtually and accomplish that training. It is our strong suggestion that all staff be trained in fair housing and on the affirmative fair housing marketing plan, not just frontline staff. We think about the example of somebody coming by the building. Maybe it's a smaller site, and so there's not a property manager there all the time, and somebody may ask somebody from facilities a question on how to apply, or do you accept persons that are disabled, those sort of questions that we want everybody that could be interacting with the public, both frontline and back of house, maintenance team, to really know how to properly answer that question and how to answer those in a way that is within your marketing plan guidelines and acceptable under the Fair Housing Act. Common errors that we see on this would be, lack of training, or training that was just a while ago, or failing to include staff training materials. So one of the things that's highlighted towards the bottom here is to include any copies of affirmative fair housing marketing or fair housing staff training materials. So if your organization held a day of training and you had a certificate or some materials from it, to attach that to the marketing plan as well. We often see that excluded. All right, I think that's it on page 4. So the last page here, page 5 of the marketing plan. So when you're completing this, additional considerations, this would be a great area to add that information that you're not marketing externally because your regulatory agreement states that all your referrals come from the VA, or you have an MOU to receive all of them from this certain pipeline. This is a great area to include that clarification and attach any documentation as necessary that you think it would be helpful for the state to review when we're going through the plan. There also needs to be on this page, needs to be signed and dated. We receive a lot of these that may be signed but not dated. So make sure that both of those are there. That's going to be the person that we are asking any questions to if there are issues with the marketing plan. And if we are reviewing a plan and it's more than 5 years old, we're going to return it back and ask for it to be updated with new census data, and making sure that those community contacts are still current and the same staff are there that you're going to be working with on site. DOH does not require that this be submitted to HUD for review or signature. If you have other funding sources directly from HUD, you may have an account executive that will need to review this as well, but we're not looking to see that this has been signed by HUD. We also do not sign them and return them back. We just review them with the either contract monitoring or the administrative review piece. These are reviewed during your contract period and also during your period of long-term affordability, if that applies to your project. All right. So that's the end of the form. Just wanted to mention again, just a few little, few additional things. So overall, some pitfalls would be incomplete information, insufficient research. So if you're missing census data. A big one that we see is failure to advertise or failure to retain proof of the advertising. So one of the questions that was asked earlier, like if we advertise online, how do we keep proof of it? Make sure you're doing that. You did all the effort to prepare this, to do the research, to train your staff, and then you advertise. But if you forget to collect proof of that advertisement, it's kind of like, if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. So make sure you're keeping those. Lack of follow-up with the community. So if you're, if your community contact is a nonprofit and they, they are not being a very effective partner, or maybe you're not seeing enough, folks come in, making sure that you're doing additional follow-up with the community. Another mistake would be lack of training of staff, or the plan not being available on site. Or sometimes we see organizations that do receive all their applications from referral, not completing this because they maybe don't think it applies to them, even though they meet that threshold to be required to complete one. Right. And the last slide on here is some additional resources that I hope you find helpful. Would be, there's a handbook on implementing the marketing plan. There's the link to the the YouTube video from the Census Bureau on how to obtain that data. Highly suggested. And the current version of this template, though, please do check with some frequency to see if a new one has come out. Links to the fair housing poster, the first link being the version in English, and then the second link being in the 12 additional languages. And also the link to find your DOH development specialist or asset manager. So if you have questions about a project that is kind of in the concept phase and you want to talk to a development specialist about what would be required with regards to the marketing plan, or if you're preparing or updating a marketing plan and you want to reach out to an asset manager, please do so. We are more than happy to talk about those things with you while you're working through them. We'd rather get it right the first time than send it back and need to have it revised. And the last bullet is just a starting off point for some minority service organizations in Colorado, just as kind of a jumping off point if you want to use this as an opportunity to refresh your plan and find some additional community contacts for least likely to apply group. So that's the end of my presentation on the marketing plan. Let's see that any other questions have come in, but this would be a great time if you do have other questions to drop them in, or otherwise I'll turn it back to Ariel.
Don't be shy. If you have any questions, now's the time.
Everybody feels really excited to go back to their offices and check when their marketing plan was last updated and make sure everything is current and outreach is being done. Yes. We can forward out after the presentation the slide deck and the kind of marked up version of the plan that we had on the screen.
All right, before anyone leaves, I do want to kind of take a moment here to talk about some upcoming trainings we have. And so I'm going to present my screen real quick. So this is just kind of what we have coming up in the next few months. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger here. So next month we have URA, and then we have a few things in the following months. The rest is kind of the save the date. We should have the remainder of the schedule posted before May. So just kind of want to let folks know. And then if people weren't able to stay the full time, here's all past trainings that we have provided. And then, like Olsen mentioned earlier, if you need to know who your asset manager is, or if you're unsure, here's a list on our website of who it is. And then if you need to figure out who your development special is, you can just like hover over the county and you'll be notified of who to reach out to. Oh, thank you, Teresa, for posting that. If you need to see where the training is, go to DOH's website and then click on the Office of Housing Finance and Sustainability, Contractor and Partner Agency Resources, and then you have all kinds of things. If you need forms and guidance here, if you need to see, what rent and income limits you should be using, and then also all the trainings that we have provided and the upcoming ones. So I just want to thank you all for joining us today and thank Olsen for presenting. We appreciate you guys sharing your time with us. And if there are no lingering questions, then we will give you 14 minutes back to your busy days. Thank you all for joining us. All right.